Thank you everyone for joining us today, taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. Much appreciated. Welcome to List Building Masterclass. We're going to go over proven tactics to grow your subscriber list. It's going to be super insightful and valuable for giving you the tricks and tips and foundation to grow your newsletter subscriber list like crazy. We have some of the best in the business here with us today. We have Nathan May, founder of The Feed Media, as well as Tyler Gillespie, otherwise known as TG, internally over here at beehiiv. He's our head of partnerships and our SEO mastermind. Great folks to be joining us and giving us some of their time. So today, just cover the agenda real quick. We're going to go through 7 different parts. We always start these with laying some groundwork around what are the kind of the prerequisites or basics that you should have covered before you get started. We're going to cover pop-ups and opt-in forms, leveraging lead magnets to provide value to your subscribers so that they are happy to give you their email, cover how to use and leverage social proof and testimonials, how to successfully run collaborations, and then finally moving into paid ads for growing your list before going into a quick Q&A. We usually have about 10 minutes towards the end for Q&A.
Yeah, my name is Nathan May. I run a company called The Feed Media, and we do growth for newsletters. So basically adding revenues, everything from running meta ads to ad subscribers to placing sponsors with people. We work with folks like Ramp and Meta, all kinds of folks. And then we also do funnels and email marketing for people. So let's say you have a newsletter and you're running a service, or let's say you have a product that sits behind that. We'll help you turn your readers into revenue.
Awesome, cool. And then on my side, guys, I'm TG, and I run partnerships, so essentially our affiliate program on the beehiiv side, and then as well SEO, so all of our content, blog production as well on our side. So happy to dive into any questions on either of those topics as we go through.
The first step to getting started with any of this is really setting and establishing a strong baseline for performance. It's critical that before you get started, you know kind of where you're starting from, because it's really hard to set goals for improvement without measuring kind of where you're starting from. So setting the baseline can be done by looking at your past performance if you're kind of consistently publishing. Knowing your audience, we cover this at the beginning of every single one of our podcasts or webcasts. Knowing your audience is super critical. If you know where they live online, how they consume content, what interests them and what gets them fired up, it's going to do like 80% of the work for you, whether it comes to creating ads, whether it comes to creating offers, whether it comes to creating your newsletter. If you know exactly that person that you're trying to reach and communicate with, you know what they think about, it's going to make your job writing your newsletter and publishing your newsletter 1,000 times easier. And then lastly, choosing the right tech stack. The right tech stack can make all the difference. Understanding the capabilities of the tool that you're using, whether it's beehiiv or another ESP, each of them has different tools and features that facilitate growth in different ways or publishing in different ways. Understanding the tools that you're using, whether you're using, automation tools on the back end like Make or Zapier, just understanding what works best for you in terms of the tech. So the first section we're going to cover is pop-up and opt-ins. We're going to cover a couple of different elements of this. I'm going to toss it to TG and Nathan as we go through. One of the most popular ways to get users to sign up for your newsletter, if you're driving traffic already, is through pop-ups and more generally other types of opt-in forms across your site. For example, if you're familiar with beehiiv, we have native pop-up forms that will pop up if users scroll halfway down the page. There's other tools that come with more robust triggering. You can do things like exit intent. You can do things like more visual design and whatnot. And then there's also things like subscriber opt-ins where you can gate your content so users have to subscribe before they read further. We're going to get not necessarily we're going to cover all of that sort of stuff, but we're going to start kind of from the basics. And the first step is design. So understanding how design impacts and works with pop-ups, because at the end of the day, the worst performing pop-ups can perform at like 1% to 2%. The best performing pop-ups, if you look at the top 10% performers can convert at anywhere from 10 to 20%. It's all about the design and how you shape the journey for the user. So we've outlined right here some of the critical elements that you should look for, whether you're using beehiiv or whether you're using a third-party platform, kind of the essential parts. And so you want to make sure that they're simple, easy to read, mobile friendly, and super easy to complete so that you're adding minimal friction to the reader's process. You are by definition adding friction to that experience when you interrupt somebody with a pop-up. And so, by having a good design, by having an effective message, you can minimize the disruption that may be created by having that pop up, and in fact actually make it an experience that users are appreciative of. So just to go over this real quick, the brand logo, your little branding there. Your heading should really position whatever you're offering the user in return for their email or what they should expect to receive. Subheading gives a little bit more context there. Our pop-up forms include just an email input. We're very, very bullish on the idea of kind of minimalism, of getting the minimum viable amount of information from a user in order for them to take the action to maximize conversion rate. CTA button, ours has like that very simple subscribe, but if you have a different offer, you can obviously put that CTA button there. And then of course, critical that you have a way for users to dismiss the pop-up. It's the most frustrating experience in the world. You are creating a pop-up and you can't figure out how to get rid of it. I'm sure some of us have experienced that before. As far as I know, neither Nathan or TG here are formally trained designers, but do you guys have any points you guys want to drop to kind of help provide some color here?
I would say like a lot of feedback we get to, like obviously the least amount of friction you can provide through the process, the best for conversion wise. Even on beehiiv, we actually have custom forms you can add as a second step where you can collect, let's say, first name and other data points, because that's one of the biggest like pieces of feedback we get. Like a lot of people want to collect first name, company info, etc. But you still can do that even via a second step form via beehiiv as well. So I just wanted to add that.
Amazing. Yeah, great point there. Yeah, multi-step forms are something that are a little bit more rare in terms of like the technology. There's a couple of vendors that we can recommend that do those. But yeah, definitely very, very valuable when you work, because again, they give you that opportunity to little steps. It's like the concept of, not asking for everything all at once because it looks much more intimidating. But once somebody submits their email, they're already there. They're already committed. So if you ask for email and you ask for like a little bit more information, they've kind of committed themselves by doing that first step. It kind of plays on that loss aversion where they've already lost, if they just give up and don't complete it, they've kind of wasted their time. And so there's a way to collect a little bit more information that way. The second one is strategic placement. So I kind of hit on this a little bit, but understanding like where this pop-up is going to fit in the user journey is super valuable. So by default, because we candidly haven't built out our pop-up functionality to the extent that it will get to, ours trigger 50% when users have read the page, and those show up once every 7 days. A lot of platforms or a lot of tools that are purpose-built for pop-ups will allow you to really customize that intent. And so you can say, a lot of them you can say trigger when it's like 10% down the page or 100% down the page or after 5 seconds or whatever you want. And so there's a lot of different ways to play with this. And, there's a couple tools, again, that we'll recommend in the recording. We'll drop some resources if you want to up your pop-up game. It can be valuable to experiment with those different triggers. So do your readers prefer, a time-based thing where it's like once they've spent a minute reading the article, maybe that if you have long content, they're not going to have gotten down the page, but a pop-up is effective there. Exit intent is very popular with like e-com, where someone goes to like leave the site. It then it's like, wait, don't leave. That can be useful if you have that capability. The other types are, you can have them like stickied to the bottom of the screen or the top of the screen. So it's less of like a pop-up, but it's kind of one of these alternative formats where it's maybe less interruptive, but also just shows up all the time. But there's a couple different pop-up criteria from the service WisePops that, these are the ones that the top 10% of campaigns use. The caveat here being that a lot of these pop-ups tools, their benchmarks are based on e-com, where this is much more kind of common or much more popular or lucrative, but you can kind of see some of the best practices here. Next is messaging and copy. So I touched on this in the top. You can see this one as an example I found that just is very, very different than what you normally see with a pop-up. I love the art. I love the copy here. How about a bear hug? Like that's that's going to take you kind of by surprise a little bit, and just really fits with this brand and the imagery. But making the messaging and copy really kind of pop, if you're a designer, you're going to hate that I referred to it like that, but making it really something special and engaging can be one of those great ways to really interrupt the user and surprise and delight them in a way that is going to get them to, really want to engage. Within that, it's really important to focus on the value proposition and not just, you can have great copy, but if users don't understand what you're trying to get them to do, then your lead magnet or your pop-up is going to be way less effective. So in this case, they have that nice copy, have a bear hug, but then they go into sign up for a newsletter. That's the action they want you to take. And then they have an exclusive coupon code that they're going to give for doing that. So very concise messaging, kind of draws you in with that first bit of copy, but then very clearly presents what they want to provide you in return. Nathan, do you have any comments here? I know that you do a lot of conversion rate optimization. I'm not familiar too much on those specifically if you use, these pop-ups all that often, but I know you do great work with like copy and, messaging with your ads.
I would extend these when thinking a lot about like landing pages and, to your point, opt-in forms. There are two things I think about. One, lead magnets can be extremely, extremely effective. So that might look like giveaways. It might look like we're doing one with this guy, Jesse Puggi, that will be like part of his sales playbook because he's really good with B2B sales. And so you're giving someone who's very much in his ICP something that is extremely valuable to them. And that's the kind of person we want on the list. The other thing I would say is, it might be a bit on the next slide so I can talk more about it there, but I'd say 99% of the time you want it to be frictionless as possible. And then there's actually 1% where you actually want to add friction. I think one slide or two from now talks about that, so I'll maybe unpack that a bit more there. I can talk about when you would actually want to add friction to your landing page.
Appreciate that color there, and we're going to get it. We have a whole section on lead magnets, so excited for you to really unpack your expertise there. So just as he said, minimizing friction, there are some cases when you want to increase friction, but as I mentioned at the beginning on the design, beehiiv kind of as our philosophy, we want to reduce as much friction because typically for newsletters, the action that you're doing ultimately is collecting an email address. And, of course, there are other considerations if you're doing things post sign up, collecting first name, last name, and so forth. But, our philosophy largely, the exceptions prove the rule. But our approach largely is if you can collect their email, there's a lot more you can do down the road if you want that extra information. But if you don't have their email address, then it's much, much harder to even get that additional information. And so we recommend keeping fields limited to the minimum amount of information needed at that moment. So that means, with something like this, we would recommend a pop-up with just the email address. And then as TG mentioned, maybe passing them to a survey form where you can collect first name, last name, maybe some demographic information, stuff that you can customize their newsletters with. But there are cases where, you may want to add some friction. Sometimes some cases I've used in the past are scenarios where you're trying to get a really qualified audience. So if you're running a very niche newsletter, maybe a professional publication or something where has a very, very kind of small audience and you're really, really trying to get that audience to be very, very tightly focused, then having a little bit more friction to that process can be very helpful. I would point back to our first webinar, the Growth Secrets webinar with Daniel Burke. Him and his wife run a local newsletter in Charleston, South Carolina, for parents, and it's basically like things to do with kids around the Charleston area. And so they actually add a ton of friction. They literally ask people, if they subscribe but they don't fit the criteria that they're looking for, they literally ask them to unsubscribe. And because of that, they have a very, very tight market fit, but they sacrifice some growth. And the trade-off there is that they're able to create this publication that is incredibly tightly focused on a specific niche and really helps to, create value in terms of, the opportunity for advertising, the focus of the content makes it much easier to be able to be more impactful when you have that super tight idea of that niche audience. Lastly, and you'll see this come up again, testing and iteration is always a part of this process. So A/B testing different offers, testing different headlines, testing different triggers. There's a bunch of different ways you can test these various forms of kind of interrupt marketing, if you will, to find the one that has the biggest impact. And that's, maybe sign up conversion rate is one, but you may also look at the quality of the subscribers that come from a certain type of pop-up. So not just the number of people or the proportion of people that actually complete the pop-up, but tracking to see, okay, these people signed up for the pop-up, but their open rate is lower than average. Or we use this offer and we're getting way more leads, but maybe the quality is lower. Or maybe the quality is way higher, and that's how you find a winner. It can be as simple as just looking at who's signing up to which one, but also invite you to look kind of at deeper level metrics that actually are the ones that are moving the needle for you in your publication to understand which versions may be leading to the most success. As we promised, moving into lead magnets. This is a incredibly valuable concept that has been around for a little while now, but you'd be surprised at, especially people newer to the game, maybe haven't heard of it or aren't necessarily leveraging this tactic as much. And so we'll get into what a lead magnet is in a second, but essentially what you're going to be doing is offering some sort of incentive to a user to get them to take that first action. This is going to be a free resource, something that's absolutely free that gives them some value in return for their email. If you just set up a pop-up or you set up a collection form and just say, hey, subscribe, for no reason, you're going to have a very low conversion rate. Even a newsletter, if you're having people subscribe to a newsletter, the presumed value is that they are getting that newsletter. But if somebody is not familiar with your newsletter yet, and they're kind of not sure what value they can get from it, and they may be unsure of who you are as a person, they don't know your expertise, offering some sort of resource in the form of a lead magnet can be that incentive that kind of pushes them over the edge to get them to subscribe or get them to sign up. And then from there, they're on your list and you're off to the races. So these can come in the form of ebooks, checklists, templates, videos, courses. It could be literally anything. I would love to hear actually from TG and from Nathan here some of the more creative lead magnets that they've seen. These are kind of the ones that are listed here are the most common ones, but there are an incredibly wide number of very creative ones. And even if people have seen some creative lead magnets, I would invite you to drop those in the chat, and I'll give this to Nathan and TG to take.
So there are two ways that I would think about lead magnets. One is, you want to think very specifically about the problem that your newsletter solves, and that individual person, right? What's something that would be awesome, free value to them? Usually that'll be like, I'll give you the example, like Jesse Pucci's newsletter. He's done multiple, 7-8 figure B2B companies, generally service companies. They're all around sales. And so he knows a ton about how do you generate leads, how do you turn those leads into sales? And so we're doing a couple lead magnets. Many of them are going to be on his sales framework. So take a 30-minute sales call, right? What are objections? What are all the specific objections that Jesse prepares for? We might even give like actual calls. So he has companies like Growth Assistant, Ox Insights. They're recording their sales calls. Giving those away for free can be super, super valuable. On the other side, the thing I would think about is, particularly if you're running a business, so like for some of the AI newsletters, like the Rundown or the Neuron, we've gone and helped them create lead magnets from scratch. But if you're already running a business, you may have lead magnets, you just don't realize you have them. So Tyler's newsletter, Big Desk Energy, is a great one. He's been giving away beehiiv seat deck for ages. It's been a dedicated lander on his newsletter. And so we've just turned that into various different images. Some are kind of high fidelity images like this you see on the right-hand side. Others are more tweet style format. And those have been tremendous for his paid ads. And they're super valuable. He didn't have to do any additional work that was already there. So I try to think about both of those things.
Cool. Yeah, and I'll just add, just piggybacking on that, what I've seen work well is usually shorter, very digestible pieces of content. And that's where EJ had mentioned checklists, resources, very short guides. I'm also seeing short email courses work really well beyond, let's just say, a traditional PDF lead magnet that you might download. Again, to Nathan's point, solving a pain for your audience, giving them a very quick win as well, I think works well there.
Yeah, one of the ones that beehiiv is just recently launched, and that I've seen some newsletters like Smooth Media, the folks who run Colin and Samir's newsletter, they've worked with are quizzes as well. So quizzes, there's a bunch of tools. We built ours from scratch, but there's a bunch of tools that you can use out there like Outgrow and a few others where you can set up a very simple quiz that gives the user some sort of value. What type of creator am I? How much could I make from a newsletter? These sorts of things where they're questions that these people in your audience may have. And this is like a pure value play where it can be personalized in a way. So it's, kind of takes that a step further where not everyone's necessarily getting the same piece of content. And it adds some gamification. So gamification is a super interesting concept in the design of experiences. And it kind of plays on both of those where you put them through the quiz. And then at the end of it, you say, hey, if you want your results, where should we send them? And they enter their email. And then you have their email address. Typically with something like that, you want a little opt-in box that says, by submitting your email, you're going to receive emails from us. Otherwise, people may be like, oh, I don't remember subscribing, or I don't know who this is, but it can be a way to make things work. And they would work really, really well for paid ads. And we'll get to that at the end of the deck. But being able to have an offer where you're distributing this over social can be something that, it can be very bite-sized and engaging and easy to optimize around. We kind of got into this a bunch, but the different types of lead magnets, there's downloadable guides, exclusive content, free trials can be a lead magnet. We've seen some people who offer a 7-day trial to their premium, version of their newsletter. We've built these building your newsletter from scratch with TikTok guides. So how to get 1,000 subscribers in 90 days. We've done our state of the newsletter or state of the industry, the newsletter industry report at the beginning of the year is a lead magnet in a way in which we are, we advertise that to newsletter creators for us to be able to identify them, as a company. But anything like that, if you can imagine it and somebody could find value from it, you can turn it into a lead magnet. And the more creative, the better. A lot of people out there doing guides, doing ebooks, we find that if the more creative and the more tailored to your audience the concept is, the better it'll perform. Because, just like with banner ads, people, I don't want to say the value is obviously played out. It's not. They still work tremendously well. But it is the type of thing where to differentiate yourself within a feed, of ads, especially if you're running it as ads, that differentiating factor can be very, very powerful. So best practices, you've heard we've kind of covered a few of these, but, one, make it relevant to your audience. solve a specific problem and keep it simple and valuable. I think these points hit on exactly what Nathan and TG were saying a second ago. This was one I came up with this morning. I had a person who was reached out to me today. I have to update this. Sorry, it's not Tricycle Day, but this is a lead magnet that I was reached out about, from a user, and it was perfectly relevant to what we're talking about today. So this person's offering slides. They're offering a presentation that users can download or receive if they enter their email. But for that audience who are consultants, having a slide deck is something that they're used to consuming. It's solving a specific problem of getting more clients with social media. And the action is super simple. It's slides, so it's easy to consume. It's not going to take them 2 hours to read through an 80-page report. It's so super digestible, so the friction can be lower there. Lastly, just like we said with these pop-ups, optimizing for conversion is key. So making the call to action clear, concise, and visible, understanding that, you want to make it very clear what the user should benefit from when they receive this lead magnet, whether it's teaching them something they don't know, whether it's giving them something that they didn't have, whether it's giving them access, status, whatever it is. That call to action should be very clear and concise, easy to read. It should be there's this thing called the squint test, where it's like, if you can imagine squinting at an ad or a landing page, when you squint, it should be the only thing or the first thing that you see. I like to use that quite a bit, from my agency days. A/B testing, obviously incredibly powerful form of understanding which offer will perform better. If you have some sort of tool that can offer a lead, an ebook versus a video, you can see which one will perform better, or those can be two of any different type of lead magnet. And of course, identifying maybe folks from LinkedIn, will resonate more with slides versus people with, from Twitter or X may resonate more with an ebook. So understanding your audience and how different platforms and different offers and different designs may influence the uptake of those offers, because every improvement you're able to make and every refinement, optimization, gets you more subscribers, is going to get you growing and building your list more quickly.
I saw this lead magnet for the 10 best ads for e-commerce dog food brands. So the lesson here will be if you think your lead magnet is specific, it can always be more specific. So this is this guy's agency is doing a lead magnet, 10 best ads for e-commerce dog food brands. And I'm like, this company has to be tiny. I mean, that is so specific. How many e-commerce dog food brands could there possibly be? And so I looked the guy up on LinkedIn. He's got 20 employees, which means that the agency is probably doing somewhere between $1 and $5 million per year. And so if you think you're too niche in your lead magnet, you're probably not. The second thing I was thinking about is, ideally, particularly if you're running a business and your newsletter is the front end for that, this can work for consumer as well, you want your lead magnet to solve a small problem, but also create a bigger problem. So another example is this guy, Daniel Fazio. He's a YouTuber. He does a couple different things. He's Cold Email Wizard on Twitter. He's a big B2B cold email guy. And one of his lead magnets is just giving you, he's run hundreds, probably millions of emails. And he'll give you his 10 best email subject lines that have ever worked for agencies. And so amazing, you want that. Well, now what do you say in the emails? Or if someone responds to your emails, what do you say? Well, that's actually a low ticket, $10 paid product you can buy, right? So he's solved a problem amazingly well, and he's just created a slightly smaller one. And you keep going down that funnel, and he has courses. He just launched a SaaS called ListKit, which competes with Apollo this year, and it's already doing, I think, maybe $3 or $4 million in ARR. So if you just think about walking that funnel back and starting with that really small problem, he's been able to do that, and now has a company that probably in total is doing close to $600,000 to $700,000 a month in revenue.
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect example. This is a little bit more of a sophisticated implementation, but within kind of classic e-commerce funnels, the lead magnet would lead to what we call the tripwire offer before you make kind of your major offer. And that's a perfect classic implementation of that, where you offer the lead magnet, it creates the awareness or kind of scratches the itch of a bigger problem. And then you basically immediately position the solution for that. And you have a very, very affordable, super discounted, very low ticket product that's entire purpose is just to get the user to take their wallet out. There's a very strong psychological barrier between people who have never paid you and have paid you literally any amount of money at all. It's the goal is literally just to get them to take their credit card out. And take that action of transferring value. And so this can translate to newsletters in that if you have your funnel set up where you have somebody who subscribes or you have a lead magnet that you're offering, taking them to an experience where you can then offer them some sort of, very low ticket offer. If you're running a premium newsletter, it could be, get 1 month of premium access for $1, or something like a course or what have you. This can be a really lead magnets can be a really great lead in to that kind of very low ticket tripwire offer that is meant to literally just take some percentage of your users and turn them into people who have paid you. And then from there's like a whole strategy around then, okay, offering bigger and bigger offers down the road. But in the world of newsletters, typically for, I'd say like 80 to 90% of people, it's like the ladder is free, visitor to free subscriber to paid subscriber. And then perhaps there's courses and stuff down the road. But that can be a really great way to ladder up to those different rewards and different things that you're trying to sell. Cool. So this is an area that I know is super near and dear to TG. So I'm going to lean on him a bunch for this section and probably the next section as well, because I know he'll have some great feedback. But social proof and testimonials are super powerful within this process of generating leads and building your list, and cannot be overlooked because it's the kind of catalyst that'll just like blow things up. I know also that I've seen a ton of Nathan's work and his flow into this a lot as well. Social proof is more or less just other people, other humans, basically giving credibility to whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's a newsletter, whether it's an e-commerce business. People trust word of mouth more than any other form of marketing. And so social proof kind of leverages that concept of word of mouth and kind of translates it into the digital medium so that you can then distribute and show people that word of mouth kind of at scale. People, in short, trust recommendations from others more than whatever marketing copy you're going to write and put in front of them, because they know that you're biased. They know that you have a perspective. Of course, if you're running a newsletter, you're going to say, this is the best newsletter for pets out there. This is the best AI newsletter out there. But of course, you're going to say that. They'll trust somebody else who may be an expert or somebody that they trust saying, this is actually, in fact, the best X newsletter out there. Collecting social proof in itself is a science. The way that you deploy it can be a bit of a science as well. The different types of social proof can be subscriber counts, kind of one of the most basic ones. So join over X number of subscribers that are out there. So join over 100,000 subscribers. With this, a lot of times very specific numbers work best. So very kind of numbers ending in odd numbers, particularly. They've done a lot of research on this. So it's like join 10,000 537 subscribers is going to be much more compelling than just say join more than 10,000 subscribers. The next type would be testimonials. So collecting quotes, whether it's from places like X or actual review sites, or taking emails that users have sent back to you saying, hey, thank you so much for this amazing newsletter. I share this with all my friends. Whatever it is, any way that you can collect these quotes from happy subscribers or customers or influential figures and display them will go a long way. User-generated content is equally valuable, kind of moving up the level of difficulty in acquiring these. So, if somebody goes online and goes to TikTok of their own accord and is like, wow, I just discovered, this great newsletter and it's changed my life, and they share that on social, kind of the visual media, picture being worth 1,000 words and a video being worth 1,000 pictures, that's going to be much more impactful than just a quote on a page most of the time. Fourth, awards and accolades. There's different types of awards programs out there. I think in the next year or so, beehiiv is going to launch an awards program so that we can basically recognize the top newsletters that are out there. But any other types of awards from industry groups or things like the Webbies, or there's marketing awards that you can apply for through organizations like Muse. Any way that you can show these awards that kind of have a third party stamp of approval are going to help basically provide that kind of assurance that as a subscriber, trusting my time with you is going to be worthwhile. Nobody wants to waste their time. Nobody wants to have their inbox filled up with junk. And so having that stamp of approval is one way that you can get through that, whether it's kind of any of these methods. I'm sure there's more. I would imagine there's probably other types. These are the most common. TG, do any others come to mind, or any others that you've used successfully?
There's a lot of great tools out there. We specifically use, if you go to beehiiv.com/love, a tool called testimonial.to, and we've integrated that into our onboarding flow. You could do it at a certain point in, let's say, your welcome automation or your automation in general, when a certain subscribers, subscribe for a certain amount of time, to collect kind of feedback as well. Do they love your newsletter? So then you can actually execute against, like what EJ's talking about, with some of the different types of social proof, especially if you can capture video, written, etc. Those can also be great ways, and I'm sure Nathan's leveraged this as well, to run as ads to get more subscribers to join your list. So those are at least a few ideas there. I don't know if, Nathan, you have anything to add?
No, nothing big. I think that's very fair.
In terms of placement, there's plenty of places. TG just went over a few. beehiiv offers the ability to put testimonials on your subscribe landing page, but in welcome series, in ads, all kinds of great things there. Our next section after social proof is collaborations. The four kind of ways of collaborating would be like partnering with other creators, doing swaps and recommendations, joining and do like co-branding webinars and events like the one that we're doing today with Nathan, and then affiliate and referral programs. I know TG can speak a ton to that last one, as that's what he does day in and day out here at beehiiv. But partnering with creators, there's networks like our recommendations network. A lot of other platforms have these recommendation networks where you can trade recommendations. You can partner to do like guest posts, and so that you kind of can cross expose your subscribers to other writers, or drop, promotions and kind of sponsorships, almost like a fake sponsorship, like a unpaid sponsorship, to say, hey, if you like my newsletter, you got to check out this other one. Webinars are great for bringing large groups of people together and kind of cross-pollinating the content. And then of course, affiliate and referral programs are the ultimate in, incentivizing people to go through and kind of rewarding folks for collaboration. We'll have these in the notes that we distribute. And then just going through paid ads, of course, there's, choosing the right platform. That's going to have a lot to do with where your audience lives and spends their time online. If all of your folks are spending all their day on X, then advertising heavily on TikTok is not going to necessarily be as efficient than really cracking the code with X. There's a bunch of different ad formats. You can do videos, you can do static, you can do lead forms, which are literally users who are subscribed like on the platforms themselves, and you just get the user's email. Those all have pros and cons. Again, if you guys have questions, I'm sure Nathan would love to answer those in the Q&A that we'll just jump into in a moment. And I'm sure he can answer also questions about budget allocation. That's a big thing, how much you should spend per lead, how much your budget should be when you get started. A lot of it depends obviously on the economics of your newsletter, whether you're a free newsletter, whether you're ad supported, whether you run premium stuff, whether you're a coach and you're doing lead gen. All of those different things play into it. We have a tool through beehiiv that you can use to calculate your subscriber value, so you can really understand how much you should be able to pay for a subscriber. And then lastly, tracking the ROI, understanding that when you pay for a subscriber, kind of how does that track against the lifetime value of that subscriber. You obviously, if you want to grow, you want to be getting more value from the subscriber than you're paying. And there's some ways that we can show you how to do that. We'll include the links to those calculators in the notes in the recording, but just running through this for the sake of time, we'll just jump to the AMA, and with that we'll open the floor to questions.
Cool, EJ. So I'll throw some questions I jotted down here. There was a lot of people asking about beyond friends and family, which is like the initial kind of push you might use to start building your list. Beyond that, what are your guys' suggestions on actually where do I go after that? Starting nearly from zero, but then how do I actually build my list? So let's start with that question. That was a very common one in the chat as we were going through.
Yeah, I would say, so if I were starting a newsletter from scratch today, I'll give you one recommendation if you're like a B2C newsletter, right? So like a consumer focused newsletter, one if you're a B2B newsletter. If you're doing a consumer newsletter, and that would be 1440, like the news, for instance. I'm a big fan of paid ads. Generally, you can get a subscriber for between $1 and $2. And even if you don't decide to turn your newsletter into a business, you can run a meta ads budget of $10, $20, $30 a day. And it will teach you so much about running paid ads. That is a skill you will take away, even if you don't turn your newsletter into a business. I think it's one of the best niches to start to learn how to run paid ads in. If you're running a B2B newsletter, it's much more important who is on your list a lot of times, rather than how many people are on your list. And so I've seen a lot of people, I actually do this, go on LinkedIn And if you're looking for your ideal customer profile, literally one-on-one DM them, almost like a lead magnet, using your newsletter as a lead magnet and accumulating people that way. I have a small newsletter for newsletter operators, but it's only people that are doing between 100K to 10 million per year with newsletters, and I very specifically am curating that audience. So just two things I'd mention there.
Yeah, I would say we covered a good number of these kind of sort of like how do you get jump started questions in the growth sequence webinar with Matt McGarry as well. So I recommend checking that out for some good tips. And obviously those are great ones, Nathan. I'd say just like a preview from some of the stuff we covered in that other one would be, when you publish your newsletter, the feedback that you're getting is critical to refining your content for engagement and really finding that content market fit, as we call it, where it's not that different from a startup. You're kind of in the very beginning when you have no subscribers, or kind of figuring out what is most compelling, what's going to get people to subscribe and to keep coming back and to share the newsletter. And we find that typically, like when you really hit that content market fit, there are signals that you start to grow relatively organically, whether it's people sharing, whether it's people sharing posts on social media from the web and collecting subscribers that way, whether it's SEO. And one of those ways you can kind of hack that feedback loop is through social media, which is free to post on, whether it's Twitter or X or Instagram. If you're publishing once a week, you get in a month, you get 4 opportunities to collect that feedback. But with social media, it really gives you the opportunity to test and refine almost like infinitely. You could be posting multiple times a day to really understand what your audience is resonating with. And that can help you test your voice, your tone, the kind of copywriting that you're doing, imagery, topics, all of these different elements that go into launching a successful newsletter. You can collect signals on that through social media because, people will respond by engaging with your content or not. And in that way, you can start building your social distribution channels through that process, but it also then is a feedback loop that can gain you some subscribers, but also help you refine and get that content market fit and give you those valuable feedback.
Mo, I think that I pronounced that right, but also was asking, cool, what are your favorite social networks or social channels for actual newsletter growth? Do you have any that come to mind? What is working well, as of today to actually get newsletter subscribers?
Yeah, I would say, also, by the way, hey Mo used to be on my team for an app I ran called hashtag Experts. That's a fun full circle thing. So there's a newsletter operator I work with, Rowan, who runs the largest AI newsletter. They're called The Rundown. And I want to say his first, maybe even 150,000 readers came from Twitter and LinkedIn, just from his interest in AI. He didn't start as an expert. He doesn't have a technical background. He was just a guy who found that topic really interesting and went into it. Hey, I'm just going to learn about this thing and share the most interesting things that I know. And so for anybody here who's feeling like, I have to be an expert to post on social media, I got to do all this research before I start, I would just say get started, because that can be a tremendous channel for newsletter growth.
I would say that's great advice, obviously. Yeah. Also, and it comes down to really understanding where your audience lives. If there was a niche, social media network that, comparatively not that many people use, but that's like where your audience spends all of their time, that's where you should be posting. It comes down to going where your audience is. If you target younger side of like Gen Z or Gen Alpha, you're going to want to be kind of tuned into what are the new social networks that are emerging, and maybe be very literate in kind of those emerging social networks and experiment there, because that's where your audience is going to be. Whereas if you're running a newsletter towards maybe older folks, kind of more mature audience, you may want to be on Facebook, because that's where you're going to get more engagement with that older crowd. If your folks are content creators, YouTubers, or Instagram creators, you'd want to be on those platforms, where they're going to be spending their attention. And kind of, as we always come back to, it's just knowing that audience is really the key indicator. If your audience is on Instagram and you're focused and doubling down on YouTube and not maybe cross-posting or reformatting your content for Instagram, and you're exclusively focused on YouTube, you're going to grow slower than if you went to where your audience is. So it's not really a one size fits all. Sometimes different platforms can facilitate that more easily. Instagram, you have to do the link in bio thing, or you have the single link, or, so you may not be able to link directly to your newsletter. You can't link in comments. So you have some more challenges there. So there's some unique challenges to particular social media networks, but I wouldn't let those discourage you. It really comes down to your audience hangs out. Where are you going to be able to reach those people and actually get in front of them and understand, how to kind of speak their language?
Cool. Sounds good. So one question that was kind of posted a few times, EJ, this one might be a good one to touch on, Nathan as well, but tactics maybe you should or shouldn't use. There was definitely a couple people asking about, cool, should I buy a list, scraping emails, etc. I think kind of maybe touching on the difference, maybe between kind of opt-in, opt-out, cold outbound to newsletters. I think that could be good just so people can kind of understand what is kind of the best approach there.
100%. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into that, but I would say buying a list or scraping a list can be very tempting because the numbers that you'll see either on these data platforms or by people reaching out and offering to sell a list, may look very enticing. It's like, oh, imagine I could send an email and get in front of hundreds of thousands of people. I really compare those tactics kind of like to crack, and that it might feel good for a second, but it's really going to lead to kind of a lot of negative outcomes, and that by reaching out to people who have not opted in, you're going to increase the number of spam complaints you get. With beehiiv, that's disallowed by our platform. You're not allowed to do cold email from beehiiv because it impacts the reputation of the platform so negatively. Plus, people just don't like being cold contacted. There is an industry for cold email that exists, and it exists for a reason because if you can do it right, especially kind of more in a sales capacity, there are some ways to do it right, but you have to be very, very careful and design it in such a way that you're going to minimize the chance that you piss people off. But in terms of newsletter growth, we tend to discourage it. Scraping emails is kind of similar in that these people aren't opting in; they didn't ask to hear from you, and you might be able to upload 1,000 people that you scraped, but those aren't true subscribers. They didn't opt in, they didn't subscribe. They're just people that exist, and you run the risk of hurting your reputation, turning people off who otherwise may have been interested. I do like the approach, however, I think Nathan kind of touched on this, of using LinkedIn connections. Like if you have something like Sales Navigator, or you have the ability to reach out to people in your network in a way where you DM them and say, hey, I'm building this thing, I have this offer, maybe, hey, I'm launching this newsletter and some feedback, interested to see if you'd be willing to subscribe. Giving users an opportunity to opt in even if you are reaching out to them cold, I think that's a really good approach, because that can give users the opportunity to choose to hear from you, versus kind of taking it upon yourself and giving them something that they didn't ask for. But yeah, it's something that it's actually not a huge issue with beehiiv, but it's something we see a lot of people attempt to do. And it's very easy to detect when that happens because engagement is super low, spam is super high. A lot of times these lists will have very similar emails or data sets, and so it's very easy for us to see and block, and definitely don't recommend that for beehiiv because you will get caught and it will not go well. And so yeah, I personally don't prefer and have never kind of based my career tactics around cold email. There are some people who can do it really, really well because they are very respectful. They give people that off ramp. They make it simple, very clear call to action, of like, hey, interested to see if you're interested in this, click here if you are, respond if you are. I don't personally recommend it, and officially as a company platform, we don't recommend it. But if you do choose to go that way, kind of the gray hat route, it's incredibly important to be very, very careful and cautious so that you don't ruin that reputation, and cause problems down the road.
Ultimately, you acquiring subscribers for your newsletter has a cost, right? Even if that cost is not money and you're running meta ads, right? It may often be your time. And so I would look for whatever you're going to spend, either your time or money. What is the highest leverage way to acquire subscribers? There are people who are posting organically on Reddit, right? Doing every number of things to try to get subscribers. Those are generally lower leverage. The things with the highest leverage are spending money on ads, in which case, if you just look at the largest newsletters, most of that spend is concentrated in Meta. That tends to be the channel of choice. It's 60, 70, 80% of the largest newsletters' budgets. Or posting organic content. That's spending your time, right? The leverage part is that, as opposed to you kind of talking to people one-on-one, right? If your content is really good, the platform, whether that's Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn, will distribute that content on your behalf. So you're not spending as much time as you otherwise would. And so for that reason, right, I think the sort of frontier, if you will, of what you're spending versus the leverage you're getting, it will probably be either posting on social. And, Tori Dunlap, great example of somebody who was just a content creator, now has a multi-seven-figure business teaching women about money and investing, who started doing it that way. paid ads, 1440. They just talked about their numbers publicly on LinkedIn for the first time. They're doing somewhere between 40 and $50 million in revenue, and they've primarily grown through paid ads over the years. So that's kind of what I would think about as the two methods, and probably two of the top folks, right, who've done an amazing job using those methods.
Thank you so much, Nathan. Thank you for everyone who is still here with us. Much appreciated. We'd like to plug the beehiiv Slack community. If you're here and you're not a member of beehiiv, or if you're here and you're on the free plan, if this was useful, if this was interesting, we do have a paid Slack community run through Slack that is accessible to every paid user of beehiiv. You get an invite as soon as you upgrade. And so if you have not done that yet, it's an incredible place to engage with other publishers. Everybody in the community is an active paying publisher. Most of our channels have like 2,500 plus active people, multiple posts a day. It's very vibrant. If you have any questions around how to with more sophisticated techniques, you want feedback on your newsletter, you want feedback on a lead magnet, you want to suggest a product feature update for consideration. We have like 15 different channels for every different use case within the community that you would want. We love to engage with people there. You have access to some of the folks, on the beehiiv team, as well as just movers and shakers. There's some of the top people who are running agencies, running huge newsletters are in those communities, answering questions and providing value. So if you haven't, upgraded to beehiiv, then today's a great opportunity too. We have a lot of great updates coming down the road. We just launched some big things over the last couple of weeks in terms of our revamped post editor. We have a massive update coming up in the next couple of months for web building, going to transform the way that users interact with your content on the web. So look out for that. And we also have some other, obviously, intermediary updates coming as we ship every week or two. So excited to be sharing that with you guys soon. Thank you so much for your time once again. Thank you, Nathan, and thank you, TG, for your time today. You guys are rock stars, and I'm so appreciative to have you here today, and I can't wait to have you guys back for a future session. Look out. We're taking next week off on the 24th, but we're back on October 1st, and we have a full slate in October. We'll also be sharing an email that has a link that'll be a listing of all of our upcoming webinars. We're launching that either today or tomorrow, so watch out for that link so you can kind of pick and choose which future webinars you want to join. Check your email because we'll also be sending out emails around the upcoming webinars. Thank you so much. Have a great day. We'll look forward to seeing you soon.